When I listen to your podcast, you actually do introductions, and the introductions are very difficult for me. Hardcore Soft Skills, Yadi, is your podcast. If you wandered into the wrong place today, thanks for coming. But also, this is a crossover with the Hardcore Soft Skills podcast.
That is correct. And I'm Yadi, and I'm the host of the podcast. So yes, for the listeners of my podcast, you're listening now, discovering, or they're probably listeners of your show. So thank you. Happy to be here on your studio. Because I usually, as I was talking off earlier, you guys have a nice, fancy microphone studios. I'm usually at home with tiny headphones and a computer. This is great.
Whatever works. Yeah. No, we're glad to have you on, so thank you for coming.
We did our normal brainstorming to come up with the topic, and the topic that we really liked, based on some of Yadi's previous guests, is the how-to of people over process. Because people over process, we hear about people over process. People over process, you don't hear a lot about people over process on the interwebs or on LinkedIn or on random influencers yelling at each other. You don't hear a lot about that. So I think this is a super interesting topic.
Well, you come to the right podcast if you want to figure out how to do this. So by the end of this podcast, you'll have some significant takeaways that you can start to implement starting tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and that was part of the reason that I started the podcast, because I've been working in the tech world for a while, and it's a lot of focus on the process part, and particularly in Agile, it's like all about frameworks and about Scrum and about following safe and everything else. Yeah. But the part of focusing of, okay, how do I actually, when I engage with people, I am able to have a good communication or have good collaboration. Conflict occurs, how do you resolve it? So you're expected to be a natural at that person is a good people person, but how do you achieve that? It's skills that you need to develop, just like any technical skills. I deeply believe that any quote unquote soft skills are things that you need to practice and become better at.
And these aren't the sort of skills that you are taught necessarily in college or whatever, in your trainings, right? That you get formal trained.
At all. I was going to say, yeah.
Really, you're right. You just suddenly thrust into the world of work, and then you have to deal with people. Yikes.
I remember when I came up through the ranks of QA analysts, QA engineering, QA team lead, right? And then suddenly now you're a manager. But at no point in my journey did the company ever say like, okay, Brian, now we're going to teach you about interviewing and teach you about what motivates people and teach you about how to better communicate with your employees and teach you about exerting influence throughout the rest of the organization. But since you're not managers of other people, here's how to exert influence without authority. I never went through a single training, all that. It was just like, it was me just being screamed at, right? I could have said yelled at. I chose screamed at intentionally. Of, you're not doing good enough about fostering relationships with this other team. I'm like, well,
how do I do that?
I mean, I'm good at QA engineering.
Yeah.
And because I was good at that, you made me a manager. And now my job is not to do QA engineering. It's to do QA engineering at scale, which I can only do by motivating other people to do QA engineering. But you never trained me how to do these other things, but you're saying I'm doing a bad job. So now I feel attacked on all fronts. Yeah. And the way out of that is people. You can't process your way out of that.
Right. So this whole idea of you getting trained in the core skills when you first come into the market, right, to whatever skill set you bring. You mentioned QA, it could be anything. It's really, the focus is on me. So going from that to getting to the point where whether you're promoted or whatever, you become a lead of some kind, and the focus shifts from me to we. And you're no longer thinking about what do I bring to the table as opposed to what do I bring to the table that makes us collectively successful. There is nothing that enables that formally. The organization, as you said, doesn't really provide that. Neither does any kind of training. That's what we're created on, So this podcast is all around shoring up those skills that aren't necessarily core technical, right? These are about skills you need to acquire over the course of your career, not necessarily even a role. I mean, it transcends roles. When you come in, it's you dealing with just what you're brought in to do, right? As you go forward in life, you are now working with people. And that's where things get tricky, because people are these dynamic, unpredictable beings that require certain tact, a certain way that you approach them, that you deal with them. And none of that is taught, as you said, right? Yeah. So this podcast is going to tackle several different facets of how you can get into it and how you can improve those skill sets so you can be more successful. Not just you, it's also making your organization more successful.
I do have a question for you. Brian, we're describing about when you came into management roles, what was the most difficult skill that you feel you didn't have, like the quote unquote soft skill that you felt you need to acquire, and how did you develop it?
There's this old saying about before you can coach somebody, but basically people need to know that you actually care about them. You're not just ticking check boxes, that you actually do care. Empathy. Basically, is what I'm saying. I'm going to say it was empathy, because everything that we're about to talk about in this podcast that we kind of talked through and made notes about, it's going to fall into that empathy building. Now that I'm in product management, building empathy for other teams, building empathy for stakeholders, building empathy for your customer, potentially even building empathy for leadership, because sometimes they don't really have great strategies and goals. So you have to kind of, hey, we're doing the best we can with what you've given us. I'm not trying to come across accusatory. I'm trying to do the best execution of the mission I can with what I've been given. And maybe they're involved in a million different things, but you'll never know about it, because they're not going to say, hey man, look, I'm involved in a million different things, I'm really stressed out. They're never going to say that to you. So you have to build empathy at that stage where I moved from a team member up to management, where I was hiring team members and bringing them on and kind of building a culture around what we wanted to do. I wasn't very good about empathizing with other teams specifically.
Makes sense. Absolutely. What you're describing in terms of, particularly empathy with leadership is something that sometimes we feel like we need to build more.
If they have bad habits like command and control, that kind of stuff, like not because it works or not because of any specific thing, just because that's the only thing they know.
That's right.
On this podcast, we got like on the Arguing Agile podcast, it's the only thing they know.
That's right.
Like you can't come down hard on someone if that a lot of this stuff came up from Taylorism, like going back to our podcast, our 2.5 hour podcast on Taylorism. Like the idea of Taylorism is you can write down a checklist of everything that someone needs to do the job perfectly. And as long as they're following the checklist every time, they should just follow the checklist. So if they're not following the checklist and getting success, obviously they're doing something wrong. But in our work in the modern day, knowledge work, that's not true at all.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. There's like you meet some people that can develop and they're 20 times faster than another developer, and that's no fault of any individual person or process or whatever. That's just the way the work is now, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest difference really today is, I think you nailed it when you said knowledge workers, right? We're actually empowering people to bring their brains to work. We're not simply saying, here's a checklist, go do all these 16 things and go home at the end of the day. People are empowered to bring their thinking, right? Their creativity, their ingenuity to work. And if you're going to do that, there's a certain something that management, going back to the original point, they have to let go, which is this idea that I know everything they need to do. And if I tell them everything they need to do, then they should jolly well go do it. And if they do it, then we're successful. That's old thinking. It's not just recent old either. That goes back a long way. They need to relinquish that and say, they know best what they need to do. I don't. So why don't I just get out of their way and say, what's stopping you from delivering? I'll get rid of those roadblocks for you so you can deliver. And when you deliver, you succeed, I succeed, we all succeed, and the organization succeeds. I think that realization is not really prevalent in these big monolith companies, that are still structured the old way. You can't fault people if they are where they are. So they're in these environments where the structure doesn't really encourage them to empower their teams to do the best work they can. The structure simply says this is how the structure is, and you need to get these things out of these people by these time frames. Right. And we fall back into the old ways of thinking. Right. That's really the thing. So I think today, in some of the other topics that we'll deep dive into, we will explore areas how you can get out of this trap. Leaders, like you said before, we say that pretty much on every podcast. Leaders got there by being in their space, and they don't want to be in the agile space or agile ways of thinking, because why should they change the way that they think has worked for them? Well, things have changed. We're in the knowledge space now, and the cycle, the competitive space has changed a lot. We often talk about companies that fail to recognize that, and they're gone. They're not there anymore, right? There's all these big companies, and they're not there anymore. because they didn't change fast enough. We also know another thing. Thinking about it the old way isn't really aligned itself to you changing fast enough. So then something else is needed to enable your teams. Enabling your teams isn't simply just saying, okay, well, they're being successful. Enabling your teams should be seen upon as, I am actually doing my job better by having them succeed in their job. That's what we should be thinking about.
Well, we're going to get into a section on enabling teams. Segment number 1, Yadi, you already hinted at segment number 1. So now I'm doing things out of. This is what we do on the podcast. We do things out of order, like almost hinting at the. Let's talk about enabling the teams, right? Where you already started with was investing in relationship building. See, I went from cultures like I had described, where it's like I didn't really have empathy. I had to build the skill. I had to understand how to make my team more valuable to other teams and the people on my team more valuable to other teams. You do that with empathy. You understand what leadership needs and you really connect with them through empathy. And all those were underdeveloped skills. So I had to quickly learn how to develop those while I was also a manager in the organization. So of course I was a manager in the organization. So the people in leadership were looking at me like, I don't understand how did you become a manager? You don't have these skills. I'm like, yeah, but you guys don't promote based on these skills. You promote based on individual performance. And then now you're expecting that I have a different skill set. And it was weird. The investing in relationship building. I worked at that company. I left that company. I worked at a bunch of different companies. I finally ended up at this one company that when I onboarded, part of the onboarding in the first 30 days, it was like 20 something people, 22, 25 people. Part of my onboarding checklist was, have you had a one-on-one? There was a 30-minute one-on-one. You could talk about anything you want except anything directly work related. So they don't want you talking about work projects and work software. And then you had to do a one-on-one with everybody in the company within your first 30 days. That was their rules.
That's okay.
And after going through all the experiences, everything I just talked about, being a manager, having a team, etc., I got introduced into this culture, and then I was like, well, this is wonderful. This is what I wish somebody would have taken me off to the side and been like, hey, Brian, I see you have some deficiencies. Maybe you should try this.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Basically is just, I mean, the funny thing is, if you go to the I see Agile trainings or whatever, they have exercises they recommend in their training that would like map your friend or foe. Like these are the people that are helpful to me as an Agile coach. These are the people that are like against me, like when I come in, just to figure out what the playing field that you're playing on. And this is that exercise like times 10, because it's basically take a like a red string sticky board of all the people in the organization just in your segment. These are all the people that lead teams. These are all the people that make decisions. And then start having one-on-ones with all of them. Some people will hear this and be like, well, I can't do that in my organization because people say, that's not work related. We're just talking about nonsense for 30 minutes. I think if you actually do it, I think there'll be a lot more leniency than you think there will be for this type of activity to say, hey, I'm relationship building. It's super important. I need this empathy to be able to do my job. And whether you're a Scrum Master, product manager, Agile coach, middle manager, member of leadership, I feel I just ran through the cycle. The later I got in that cycle, the more okay it is. Because if you start and you're like a VP of software development or something, this is going to be an expected activity.
I think what you mentioned is very, very important. I like that they kind of build it in as you become a new manager in the organization or in the role that, hey, have checklists, have 30-minute meetings with people that are not work related. And that's very important. I think the first step to anything that you do is the connect part, because I did it with, and it was helpful in this big military organization. So I was walking around and there was these different divisions and branches. I was literally walking around with a org chart and like to understand where everybody was. But then I made an effort to go like, I'm just going to do meet and greets because I don't know what they do. I'm just going to knock on doors and be like, hey, I'm the new Scrum Master. So it was very helpful to create those connections with folks. I'm like, I'm just trying to understand your work, find commonalities between the people. And in moving to remote work, as I am now, the meet and greets were very important to us. Hey, I live in Florida. I know you're in Colorado or whatever you are. But those were really helpful to help build trust with the team. When you come to work, you already have that water cooler conversations and it becomes a little easier. So I think it's important to build that part first of connecting and building empathy.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And even in this day and age when we're working remotely, one of the things that I find that we miss is that physical kind of opportunities, right? Meeting people at the water cooler or the coffee machine or whatever. But you can have digital equivalents now. You can have these trusted channels in whatever you use, Slack or Teams or Google, whatever it is. And just tell the teams that this is just for everything outside of work. And you'll be amazed at how quickly that takes off. I tried it and on a large program, and I start seeing people put pictures of the new dog they just adopted. You know it. People are like, oh, actually building relations, whether you know it or not.
Right.
They're doing that through that.
Yeah.
Right? So when they're face to face in a meeting, this could be virtual, obviously, they talk about, how's your dog doing? It's like you know the person you're working with. And to get to that point remotely is hard. You can also do other things like team building exercises and whatnot, right?
Relationship building, you absolutely can. If you're really giving it an effort, like one of the things I said this to somebody and they thought it was so revelatory that they wanted to bring it to their company immediately. At my company, one of the things they do is they go around and they will ask people that are trying to think of what level in the organization. They'll ask for, they're not necessarily at the team level. They're really more at like the leadership level and above. They'll ask them for baby pictures or like small child pictures, right? And then they'll go to a channel on Slack and they'll say, guess who this is? And they'll give them like 3 or 4 choices and everyone can vote. And then it's up to the person to reveal themselves once a certain number of votes has come in. But that's like, they do that every week. And that's a great, I mean, like think about places that you've been in where it's like you're coming in, you're sitting at your desk and you're sitting in your cube and you know what I mean? Like you're expected to be there and you're watching the clock or whatever. Like that's what I just described is a different place than the place where you opt into the random coffee channel. And if you opt into the channel every week, it's going to set you up with a new person to talk to in the company so that after a year, you've had 40 plus introductions to different people. Some of these people you work with in your normal circle, but some of them might be from well outside of your circle.
But they're valuable contacts nonetheless.
Up and down the chain of command or whatever you want to call it.
I agree. And there's so many different ways that you can spin this too. For example, one of my programs, we started a Awesome Sunsets channel, right, on Slack. So wherever people are, they're all remote. And they would take a picture of the sunset where they're at and then say, well, today we saw this. And then people would start saying, well, where was that, right? And so one of the pictures was from an area where they have a telescope, right? And so Palomar, whatever. The where they watch the space. I'm not technical today. So one of the people was like, okay, so can you go in there and visit? It's like, yeah, people are allowed. You have to go through security, all that. So they did that and they took pictures through the telescope of the outer, and they started,
cool.
I don't know about a sunset, but look at the sun, right? And it's amazing how much gravity that has.
Right.
People start aligning to this. I'm going to go find a picture of a sunset around where I live, you know? So we had a lot of people from Colorado, was mentioned earlier. We have people from Colorado, people from Hawaii. They would put pictures of awesome sunsets from all over the world. But how you get to know one another, and they go, what do you do? I do this. And you make these connections that appear to be random, but you never know when those connections are helpful to you.
Yeah.
You know? So
It has happened. It's very important to build that because that's what people remember when you move to another company or whatever that is. And it has happened to me, for example, like people will recommend me for a job or something like that. I'm just like, they don't know what I work in or what I do. How are they recommending me for this job? But it's the fact that we build a relationship and they feel they have that trust and like, oh yeah, you're good. I recommend you for this particular role.
This is a great category for us because like in product management where I'm not anyone's direct boss, I only have these relationships to leverage, to influence, to move things forward. I only have these I don't have any authority.
That's an awesome point, Brian, because there are many roles like that, right? So Scrum Masters are other. You're not really the boss of anybody. You're leading through influence without authority, honestly, right? And how to do that effectively is through these ways of making connections with people. Because people work with people, right? At the end of the day. So I think it's good. It's like you're really not going to be able to tell someone, hey, you do this or else. Right? But you really need them to work with you and you need to work with them. So this is a really good way to do it because it's a quid pro quo at the end of the day. It's like, how can I help you? Right? How can you help me help you? Right?
Exactly.
Those are the sorts of conversations.
The other category that I wanted to make sure that actually the first category that I wanted to talk about, which we didn't talk about as the first category, was facilitation. Meaning, hey, a lot of people are saying you need to come back to the office. A lot of people are saying, oh, I prefer in face-to-face conversations, whatever. However, those face-to-face conversations are now status meetings, and now we're all checked out and zoned out and wait. I think about it when you say like, oh, we're going to do the 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? Like you don't listen to anybody when they're saying what they did yesterday. You're waiting for your turn because you're thinking about what you're going to say during your turn. Like there is a better way to facilitate those sessions. And I feel if there's a reason to bring people back in the office, and we said this on the podcast before, man, if there's a reason to bring people back in the office, you need better facilitation for your meetings that are in person. I only bring any of this up under the banner of fostering better / more open communication. You'll hear psychological safety, you'll hear in this category, and a lot of people will hear that and they'll zone right out. So many people throw so much stuff under the banner of psychological safety. But if we're going to talk about something and say we should have a higher quality of communication, what does that mean? If you're going to start right away with what does that mean, and you're going to start with, well, it means all of our meetings are better facilitated. They have a clear purpose up from the start. And then when we show up, we have someone who can kind of corral us and get us moving from point to point. If you're going to have somebody like that, great. I got to look forward to showing up to that kind of environment. The problem is a lot of companies, especially with Scrum Masters, they see that, well, that's just overhead. Where's the ROI in that? It's not immediately visible. I mean, to me, it is because I'm a product manager. But
look,
better communication, right? Better communication.
That skill set, facilitation, is another one that you're never really taught anywhere, right?
That is 100% true.
It's something that it's up to you to acquire that, but it's worth its weight in gold. You're a good facilitator, you can tell. And one of the first things that I notice when I see a good facilitator is they're not vested in the outcome. They don't care which way the meeting goes. All they're doing is opening the space up, making sure everybody has equal opportunity to share, right? And when somebody's anchoring the situation, they're gently tamping that down. That's a facilitator. They're not really thinking, well, here's my outcome out of this meeting. I'm going to favor certain aspects of it, right? When you have that, that's not facilitation. It's rare. Those skills are, I think, they should be, but they're rare.
That's interesting. A question. I have a question about that. If you have a vested interest in the topic being talked about, like if you have a strong opinion of something, I'm going to go into a meeting and I have something I'm bringing to the table, I have my experiences or I have evidence.
Yeah.
I'm saying, hey, we should make this decision because I see this evidence. And if we don't do this, then I think these things are going to happen, whatever. Those might be assumptions, but I'm bringing some data to the table. I probably should not facilitate that session. I probably should try to get somebody else.
Ideally, yes, that's correct. And if you were forced to facilitate because there's nobody else available, one of the first things you could do is, like you said earlier, be evidence driven, right? Yeah. So just say, here's what I think we need to decide on, here's why, and here are the repercussions of not deciding on that.
It'd be better to get help. Again, I'm the product manager. Yeah. I should be evidence driven. I know that, but I also am aware of my own personality, and it'd be better to you know what? I'm just going to get help.
Self-awareness.
Definitely get help. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned is not necessarily not caring about the outcome. It's like how to keep that balance between we have an outcome to get from this meeting or from this particular situation, right. But also making it seem like you're not rushing through and getting like, okay, when guys let's get together, let's get back to the outcome. Great facilitation takes a lot of eliciting the conversation in terms of being able to allow others to listen, because listening, sometimes people think that facilitation is like you facilitate the conversation, you speak, you interject it and all those things, but it's more about how to elicit the conversation between folks and making those voices that are usually not heard more as well, while getting an outcome, as you mentioned, Brian, in terms of if you're the product owner or product manager trying to get to the outcome, you'll probably rush through and you won't get to the I need this, give it to me now, and that kind of balance between outcome and also making sure that all the voices are heard too. Having someone that is stating the goal of the session up front, having someone that's driving us to the goal of the session, and then having someone who's checking at every presentation to say, hey, are these facts or are these your assumptions? That's one part of it that I really value. Yeah. Right? I don't mind getting called to the carpet. I have no problem with that. Other people might not, though. They might be their first time being called to be like, hey, I understand your opinion. Can you present evidence with that? And they might see that as a challenge. That's the other side of this, which is the fostering it's safe to speak out and not seem like you're getting smacked down
when you're speaking out, that might be very difficult for people, especially when they're doing it for the first time.
If you're a facilitator and you know your audience, which you should, and you have somebody who's there maybe for the first time or whatever, you're going to ask people to be evidence driven, and they may not have the evidence because they've never done this before. One of the things you could do is, if you know your audience, right, you could say, well, ahead of this meeting, here's what we're expecting you to bring. That way they're not caught unawares, because that'd be terrible for them, right? They're just like in the crosshairs. Let them know up front. Bring everything you know and say, here's what we want to do. Also, the other thing I was saying earlier about the good facilitator not being vested in the outcome is, it's not that they don't care about the outcome. The outcome is the outcome. But what they're not doing is anchoring the outcome. They're not coming in saying, well, this is what I really want them to decide on. They're coming in saying, whatever the decision is, it's fairly done.
That was where I was saying is that I probably am anchored in an outcome before the meeting starts.
But you have a vested interest, and that's valid. So a good facilitator knows that, right? So they're going to balance you against the others that have different interests and say, is this right? Is this wrong? Why is that? As opposed to, essentially what they're doing is this, that a good facilitator is tackling the problem and not the people. So they're saying, well, here's the problem. Brian says this. Does everybody agree? Why do you say that, Brian? Do you have evidence to back it up? Looks like he's saying these things. Does anybody have anything to refute against that? Like, try and be as unbiased and as fair as possible. So whatever the outcome is, it's because of the interactions of the people and not because where the facilitator wanted to take it, right? It's an art. That is an art. That is not something that you can learn easily without trying it out and then experience over time. You will fall, you will stumble over time, and before you become a good facilitator. You can read all the books in the world. That won't make you a great facilitator.
When I first started interacting with the Agile community and I started going to events and stuff like that, that would be a common question. How do you get quieter team members more engaged? You have to have better facilitation. You have to have people who can see them at the end of the table, kind of shifting in their seat. They want to say something, but they're uncomfortable because the meeting size is more than 3 people. There's a number that once it's above that number, they're not comfortable talking anymore. So, but if you can spot that and then draw them into the, hey, don't you know something about this thing in the database? Oh yeah. And then you can kind of draw out their contribution, whereas otherwise they would have sat silent.
Yeah, I want to mention, because you mentioned that you get better at doing it, but perhaps not necessarily, because you have to be open for feedback, because you could say, like, I've facilitated meetings, I'm awesome at it, and the people that do not participate, they're just whatever, they don't care, and you could imply that. So it's important that as a facilitator you're doing it, but you're also like conscious that, how do I get better at it? I need to get feedback. Was this useful? Also, read facilitation books or whatever you may need. So it's not a matter of just by doing it. You could be doing the same job for like 10, 20 years and throw down your years of experience, but you could suck at it. Or you could just be welcoming feedback and trying to become better as a facilitator.
That's a really good point. A good facilitator should absolutely be open to feedback. In fact, if you facilitate a session and you get no feedback, it means you're living in a vacuum, because you have no idea how that went down.
Exactly.
So you should be soliciting the feedback and leave that expectation up front before people come into the meeting, right? That you're going to let me know how this is for you.
Yeah.
You know,
that's my product management worst nightmare, is no feedback.
Oh yeah.
No feedback is negative feedback to me. No feedback is bad feedback.
Bad feedback.
There's a whole section of the well-being of the team meshing together, the team feeling safe to contribute in meetings and whatnot. There's a whole track of things that we can talk about today that have to do with the team, as opposed to an individual, right? Like, the entry point into this that I'd like to talk about is emphasizing collaboration, meaning your contribution to the team and your ability to work with a team to achieve a goal, right? Like, we don't have heroes here. We have team players here, right? People might be strong team players and people might be strong on their own, but overall, like, there's a mix of that we value. It's not just one or the other. Emphasizing collaboration over individual performance. Like, that's a tough one, especially for people who are used to being the rock star or whatever.
Yeah, and particularly in organizations that they reward individual collaboration or they reward the rock stars of the team. I was with a company that, though, they would give you positive ratings on your annual review if you were contributing to other teams. So it was the ability to, they encourage a lot of cross collaboration, even across contracts, because I'm a contractor. So it was, if you were able to collaborate across contracts, that was something that was seen very positively. So I think that would be the good way, instead of being the common trend, which is like, we reward the person who saved the day, who broke, something was broken and they came in as the hero at the end. So
yeah, I kind of like using the sports analogy here. You know, when you have a team, the team wins in the sports, right? Not the individual. Let's just take American football as an example, right? And the quarterback is often the glory guy, all right? But they can't win the game by themselves. They've got to get the team behind them. They have to rally the team. And the team as a whole wins the game. The defense plus the offense. It isn't just one or the other. You could have strong players either side. That's fine. But they have to collaborate. And a good team facilitator, for want of a better expression, could be a scrum master, anybody, needs to recognize that and say, we're in this together. It's like the other analogy I use is I call it the Hawaii 5-0. They had, with Lee Garrett, they had these people rowing a boat across to one of the islands, I guess, in Hawaii, over sunset. Very nice looking, but everybody had to row in the right direction. So imagine what happens for a second if some people row in one direction, some people in another. That boat's going nowhere fast, right? So individual team members have to contribute in order for the greater organization, the team in this case, to be successful.
Where do you start for this? Because in a lot of organizations, individual, like the individual metrics are tracked, and like things are not tracked at the team level. So your year end reviews are individual level, your incentives are individual level. Everything seems stacked against you trying to make progress in this category.
You're absolutely right. People are incentivized and rewarded based on individual, and that's the old way, right? That we've always done that for decades, and that's still prevalent out there, very prevalent. So I think one of the things you need to do is really try to move the needle and say the team is the entity that's delivering things. It's not the individual. The individual has their hands on a set of oars and they're rowing, and that's fine. But you're going to find yourself against this tide, which is management and HR people that are put these policies in place and procedures in place of how you reward and incentivize people. So if you're a coach, or if you're any of these roles, I would say, think about it this way. When you deliver something, don't call out an individual, first of all. Don't say, hey, Fred, you did a great job. Mary, you did a great job. They may have, but they couldn't have done it by themselves.
Right.
So always pull out the whole team in front and say, I sometimes do this when the teams are small enough. I'll call out every single team member and say, you did a great job. You did a great job. Yeah, you did a great job, everybody. And then at the end, cap it by saying any one of us could have faltered and we wouldn't have succeeded. That means you need people to your left, to your right, to link arms, right? This is a team effort. Now, the reward isn't there yet, but now you got to work with management and HR to say, how can we change this, right? That's a tall order. But what you can do is you can say things like, well, as a team, this team delivered, right? So can we perhaps give them, this is the whole team, give them a bonus, right? And if you can get some money out of it, or whatever it might be, it doesn't even have to be money all the time.
It could be
money,
I've been
distribute it.
I've been in organizations that do like spot bonuses on like, because you achieved an objective, you get a pool of money and that's divided evenly or whatever.
That divided evenly, and then celebrate success as a team.
Although I could almost see that there's the other part of, if there's a team and not all the team members have been pulling this necessary weight, and there's some resentment involved of like, okay, the three of us collaborated, but this fourth person just took the credit. So there's a balance to striking that too, but perhaps it's good. I guess you have to weigh the risk of doing that, in the sense that you're promoting collaboration, but also if there's another team member that happened to have the reward and they were not pulling their weight, but eventually that could be a learned behavior eventually, that they realize they start feeling the pressure and feel bad, and like, you know what, I should collaborate better, or maybe they end out of the team eventually. But
I think over time, and that's a valid point, over time that tends to be self-correcting, because team members will see that. And they'll say, well, this person didn't collaborate. We're going to bring them in because they should be part of it, right? I mean, they're getting rewarded too. So the teams will self-correct that over time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if the team's well-being, the cohesiveness of that one team is a priority. The manager or the resource manager, hiring manager, whatever, a chapter lead, a million different things. Like basically the person who hires all the engineers in the organization, that person will start becoming hyper aware of divisions within individual teams.
Yeah.
Because they're talking to everyone individually, going back to our empathy thing that we opened the podcast on, right? They're having one-on-ones.
Sure.
They're having 8, 12, 15 one-on-ones a week. Right? This is their job, is making sure that everyone's interpersonal relationships are good and performing and growing. And if there's problems, they're hyper aware because every week they hear whatever, every month, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So there will be some kind of awareness. And whereas this could be a completely separate podcast of like, what happens intra-team? How do we deal with intra-team strife? And come out as a stronger team on the other side. But if you're prioritizing the well-being of your team, the team members are doing it, your managers are doing it, and if you're Matrix or whatever, Matrix, where's my camera?
You can't do a 3D.
Yeah, I can't. Look, whatever. Yeah. If you're Matrix, then all your managers are all aware. Oh, there's some strife on this team.
Right.
Like, I guess what I'm saying is, it's of all the teams I've been on, most of the people that are like the managers of the team, they're pretty aware of the people that are dragging. They know. They know. Yeah, at that point where you're playing like the corporate HR game, it's a matter of documentation over time to correct the issue. It's better to let the team kind of sort it out amongst themselves to say, hey, we're going to have more code reviews of this person. We're going to push this person to present more for us because we know that they're uncomfortable with it. Maybe they just need to learn the skill. Yeah. If it's a skill problem, the team will vet it out. If it's a personality problem, we need management's help. And if your management is functioning properly, kind of like we outlined earlier, you can get through this stuff and it won't drag you down for years. You can get it done and get it dealt with. But prioritizing the well-being of the team and understanding that the team needs to be developing and the team needs to be cohesive. Is that something people are on board with home? I don't know.
People should let us know.
So is that where we're going to leave that one there?
No, we're going to leave that one there. Let us know. Because whatever we say is going to be conjecture.
The other one that came up in the team category that I really want to talk about is if you're doing people over process, customizing your processes to fit each team, which is funny because we give a lot of flack on the podcast. That's what I say instead of cursing. We give a lot of flack on the podcast about my situation is unique, but also like, I mean, is it really? You're kind of like you're kind of cookie cutter with every other team doing the same widget production that you're doing. If you're newer, you need a few more rules. If you've been doing the same thing with the same people for a long time, you don't really need that many rules. You kind of all fall into a rhythm, and you can dial the process back. And this customizing the processes to really fit the team and how well they work together and that kind of stuff. This is not talked about enough. I feel it's a whole different podcast that we could talk about.
I think it's a little bit out there where people talk about the team's maturity and shuhari and all that. But I think the reality is in most cases people gravitate toward the framework or the Scrum guide and then say, if we install these things, we'll be suddenly magically so much better. And it's not like that because we always say things like, well, every team's unique. Well, if every team's unique, why should the processes they use be the same? They can't be the same, right? They're unique. So tailoring to a certain degree. Granted, you have to have the foundations, but tailoring it is important. You may have teams that are just doing back-end work or API work or just doing front-end work. I've seen that too. Ideally, that shouldn't happen, but it does happen. Sure. So then you might want to look at that and say, well, we need to get feedback for every team, but at what level, right? And how deep is that feedback? How the team gears themselves to delivering. Like maybe the API team is simply sitting back and, well, we're not done yet, and we'll deliver when we're done, as opposed to another team that's also doing APIs that say, well, we're not done, but we can still deliver the payload and stub out most of it. And we'll just have what we did in the sprint that's live, and everything else is a stub. And then next time we deliver a couple of sprints, or next sprint, hopefully, there's more live and less stub. And keep going like that. I think you need to look at it and say, are we moving in the right direction? Is it adding value? Are we on the right path? You need to tailor the processes to suit the team.
That brings to mind a few things because some teams may be saying, we've done it, we don't want any feedback. So I guess it depends on the team, but there are other teams that are kind of asking for, just tell me what to do. Tell me what to do right now. I'll do whatever you want. And they don't take necessarily accountability. So I think it's as you're going into the team and you start navigating and seeing like, hey, I'm either in your Scrum Master role, possibly, that you go in and mention to the team, okay, I want to understand how you're working, your current way of work, and they think they are automatically, you're going to establish all these rules, which is what usually happens in when it comes to Agile roles. So I think it's important to first establish that understanding with the team that, hey, you can tell me, we could customize that open communication. I am open as a lead, as a Scrum Master, to customize the process. So let's work together and take accountability. And it gives the team a little bit more, perhaps, consciousness about, hey, maybe we can improve. We have ownership, so let's improve our processes a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it's establishing that too, that communication, like, hey, it's okay. You can set it up. So I think it's important to define that with the team as well.
Definitely agree with that. I think it gives the team a bit more autonomy as well, right? So yeah, that's a valid point. But perfect example of a team that says we don't need feedback or just tell me what to do. In one team, that might be your team that's doing break fixes, for example, right? We don't need any feedback. We're doing break fixes, the defects, we're fixing them. If they're fixed, they're fixed. Why do we need feedback? Or the other side of it, which is tell us what to do, right? You tell us which bugs to fix or whatever, and tech debt to fix or whatever, and we'll fix it. But they're wrong. In both cases, they need feedback, because if you're delivering something, it's impacting somebody or somebody's, a lot of people, right? You need feedback on how well you did that.
Yeah.
You need feedback on other things. Like you need feedback internally to say, well, we fixed all these bugs and the customer said they're good. We move on. Yeah. No, that's not enough. That's just the bare minimum. Right. What we need to do now is to retrospect and say, how can we avoid those things so we don't repeat the mistakes in the future? Right. What about the process that we used to put these into production? How could we have made that more optimal? Yeah. There's a lot of things you can learn. The other side of it is tell us what to fix and we'll fix it. It's like, why not get ahead of that and work with your developers and do pair programming, etc., so you can avoid these things from being bugs in the first place.
I want to jump in on this one as the product manager here is say, if I were to scale myself, if it would be like, hey, Brian, it's your organization now. We're going to hire 5 teams now. You I can barely stick with 2 teams, right? Like now you're going to hire 5 more teams, right? So now I have a whole program basically. And I'm going to say, listen, now it's more crucial for me to just communicate what my broad goals are and then to push decision-making of how to meet those goals to the teams. If you're waiting around to be told what to do, I'm assuming that decision-making has not been empowered to your teams.
Yes.
Or you don't know what my goals are as leadership. We have this thing 100 plus podcasts ago. We talked about accountability and responsibility being together. And once you start dividing the two and splitting the two and like, oh, I'm going to keep the responsibility, but you take the accountability. Like now you have all kinds of weird problems, strange problems. And then you need all kinds of fixes to deal with the problems, whatever. Just keep the accountability and responsibility together to be like, hey, I put that on Ohm's team. Let's go figure out where Ohm's team is now. And let's go see how they're going to solve the problem. They're both responsible and accountable now. Let's go talk to Ohm's team. And now we get with Ohm's team and we figure out what they're doing. The Ohm's team's not sitting around waiting to be told what the next thing is to do. I've given them the problem. They're both accountable and responsible for that problem now, right? The business outcome is his now to deal with. And I'm checking in with him and I have to trust that he's having communication with the customers, the proper people, other people internally that also are experiencing the problem or helping solve the problem or whatever. Like, he now owns the whole problem, which includes all the outcomes and everything that we're trying to do. If I'm empowering him fully, or I'm playing a game.
This is one of the issues I have with the old style RACI matrix, where we say, well, there's one accountable, but there can be multiple responsible and they're different people. As soon as you do that, to your point, we're
playing a game. We're playing a game.
Right, exactly.
Does the accountability and responsibility go together and then I'm handing them off? Or is there other things going on that we need to solve?
I've typically seen the latter, unfortunately.
Well, don't do that.
Exactly. There you go. That's the lesson learned out of this podcast.
We talked about what you can do to empower your teams. Yeah. We talked a little bit about what you can do with empathy to empower your ability to influence. We talked about a few other things that you can take these things back to your organization. And I mean, you can make an impact pretty much immediately with any of these things. You can just decide to start doing them. And if you're listening to the podcast saying, well, I can't do this in my organization because XYZ, whatever reasons are. I mean, think about that and really think if those reasons are really, if they really are a roadblock or if they're just kind of like
Yeah, it's important that you mention that because sometimes we feel limited by, it's the organization. But I think it's important as individuals to just like, okay, let's take that first step. Let's be accountable, communicate, or like reaching out to call people, or just like, hey, in this meeting, I'm going to make sure that if I have the role of the facilitator this time, I'm going to go ahead and, make sure that I give, while I'm on the stand, give the voices that need to be heard, the opportunity to be heard. So
Right.
I think it's small steps that you can take, and you could blame the organization all day long, but perhaps if you start modeling those behaviors, and other people could kind of gather and imitate possibly.
Yeah, well, that's that lead by example category we didn't go
Exactly.
into. I think a lot of organizations that I've been in, and again, I'm a product manager, so it kind of follows the career path, but a lot of organizations that I've been in, the bias for action over, I guess, inaction or following rules or whatever, like that is seen as in a more positive light. I think it will be seen more positively than you might be thinking, because the organizations that I've been with have respected a bias for action over anything else.
Yeah, I agree with both of you there. And the last thing I'd say in closing is try all of that. If you still feel like you're shackled by your organizational structure, then take that advice that we always give on the podcast. Keep that resume updated.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you all for staying with us this long. And let us know down in the comments below what you'd like us to tackle next. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
That's right. Subscribe. Hardcore Soft Skills Podcast.
Go to any podcast platform and find the episode. So it's hardcoresoftskillspodcast.com. And you could find all the episodes about agility, conflict resolution, listening. So in each episode is actionable skills that you can take and how to improve on each.
I feel this is the place that you're going to get it. People that are living in the roles, people that's been their careers, this is where you're going to get that, because again, trainings and whatnot, I just don't see a lot of this out there floating around. But for anybody listening to this who says, oh, you're wrong, Brian, well, get in line, because if I'm wrong and you do see this in different training spheres, and there are people that train on this and there's places to go, like,
We want to hear from
I
you.
want to hear about it in the comments. I have not experienced a lot of places that start with this people over process as a concept to say, hey, rather than teach you these concepts of processes and teach you this is the right, quote, process, let me start with these people skills, and maybe you can figure out how to work the best, even though the process is not that great.
That's a unicorn. It doesn't exist.
Like unicorns. Thanks so much.